This is the Recovery Lab.
Here we dive deep into the struggles, victories, and hope that stem from recovery.
No shame, no judgment, just truth, grace, and inspiration.
Let's walk this road together.
All right. Welcome back to Recovery Lab. This is episode 123. I'm David Sugg.
I'm Brynn Knox.
I'm Daniel Anderson.
We are the Recovery Lab, and we are here this week. Super special episode. We've got Bryan Hubbard. He's going to talk to us about some really cool stuff happening in Texas and Ibogaine research. And Bryan, I'm super excited to have you here with us this week. You know, I've listened to a couple of your podcasts. I think the whole world heard you on Rogan. It was super cool to hear that initial, but after that, because I listened to it, you popped up all over my Spotify stuff. I've listened to a couple of your other interviews, and I just love hearing your story. I've heard a lot of different angles of it. It's really, really cool. But if this Ibogaine thing if you get done with it at any point, I know you have a great career in like narrating cookbooks or something, because your voice is smooth as cupcake batter, brother. I love it. I could meditate to like you reading my grandma's chicken pot pie recipe. I would love it. So anywho, super excited to hear you talk, but more importantly about the content of your heart and the stuff you're working on. It's just awesome. It's really, really cool. So Bryan Hubbard, welcome to the show. What's up? What you been up to?
Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction. And you're a man of high tolerance and stamina if you've listened to a bunch of what I've had to say. It's an honor and a privilege to be on y'all's platform and spend some time with you today. And I'll let you all drive this discussion in whatever way you want.
Cool. Brynn.
Yeah. So before we get into the Ibogaine treatment itself, can you tell me a little bit about your life before all this and why you needed to go down this certain path? Is there anything specific you were struggling with?
Well, I don't want to belabor it. I know that y'all have heard a lot, and perhaps some of y'all's audience members has as well. Really, what started me here was the beginning of my life. And, my earliest memories, my parents married when they were very young. They grew up in a real hard scrabble area of Virginia, a place called Dickinson County, which had a lot of coal. And when you have a lot of coal, you have a lot of hardship. And they were young when they were married. And by the time I came along, they were coming to the end of their relationship. And what I can remember is a bunch of screaming and cussing and chaos. And I was a petrified child. And I just remember spending a lot of time being afraid and my stomach hurting and just worrying about what the next day, the next hour, the next minute might bring. And I had two just beautiful grandfathers who were grade school educated, UMWA coal miners. Both of them had gone into the mines when they were in their mid to late teens, worked underground for 40 years. Neither one of them had a full set of fingers, and my dad's dad, you could hear him breathe 50 foot away from where he had black lung that was exacerbated by tuberculosis that about took his life. But he made it. And when I was a little boy, I would go and spend time with my papaws, at different points, a lot of weekends and time during the summer. And whenever I go visit, at some point in time, they'd pull me aside and put me on their lap and put their arms around me and say, listen, Papa knows you're scared, but you need to know Papa loves you and Papa's praying for you every day. But the most important thing that you have to know and remember is that God loves you.
Amen.
He has made you unique, and he has a special purpose for your life. And no matter how bad it gets, no matter how scared you are, don't lose sight of who made you and the fact that he loves you and he will get you through. And if you can hang on, you will achieve the design he has for you. Now,
can I just pause you real quick and say how that's so incredible, because I can't imagine like what a difference that would have made in my life if someone would have taken the time to look me in the eyes and tell me that. I mean, I had people all around me, and I know like people that loved me, but nothing like the message that you received from them. So that's just amazing that you got that.
Well, thank you for affirming the next part of what I will observe, and that is that those gentlemen gave me sanctuary from chaos, the stability of their unconditional affection, and an affirmation of my spirituality. And if I had not received those things from them consistently, if I were alive at all, I would not be sitting here speaking to you as I am. There's little question in my mind, but that if I were alive at all, I would be in some dark hole wondering what someone was going to come do to help pull me out of it. It made all the difference. And, I'll be 50 years old in October. And just candidly speaking, I think as a Generation Xer, we were the first to experience the mass dissolution of family and community in this country. And we found our ways in different circumstances where we had to kind of make the family that we could construct based on those who are around us who could give us that love. And I think that what we see in American society in terms of the real time disintegration of the social fabric that is manifest all around is rooted in a complete and total disconnection from our human divinity, the love with which we should treat each other. And unless we do something over the next 20 years to fix what's happened over the last 30, we're in big trouble.
You stepped off in it there. Yeah, you went deep. I appreciate that. Yeah, just go ahead and call it like you see it, what the problem is. So from growing up and feeling the love to where you are now, tell us a little bit about your education and your story to kind of get to how you've arrived at the position you're in now.
So I grew up in Russell County, Virginia, in a little town called Lebanon. A lot of wonderful people there. But it's one of those communities where it is very much part of that neo-feudal coal mining economy that's very extractive and very aristocratic. You either live there and conform to the way things are, or you raise your children to get out and go somewhere else. And I was among the families that raised their children to go somewhere else to have a living. I had a very idealized education in American history and civics. I was taught by women who had either come of age during World War II or had been trained by those women. And I was taught that America also, another teacher was President Reagan. I can remember like a duckling to a duck, he imprinted my mind when he took the debate stage with Jimmy Carter in 1980. And I was just transfixed on who he was, the way he spoke, and the way he talked about the country. He was my John Wayne, my Joe Montana, or Michael Jordan, whereas the other children had pictures of those guys and sports figures up. I had Reagan. And he spoke of the shining city on the hill, a place of endless possibility where every nation, kindred, tongue, and tribe could come and live and thrive. And that inspired me to, at third grade, I said, I want to be a lawyer and perhaps go into public service sometime. And that was my singular focus. So I graduated high school. I had this idealized notion of what the country was going to be. I had a great time in undergrad. Went out to George Mason University right outside of DC. It was a culture shock because for the first time in my life, I was a very distinct minority. There wasn't anybody around who come from where I did or sounded like I did. It was a plurality. It was a majority minority campus. And probably the single largest group happened to be white students, but they were predominantly from the DC area in the Northeast. And I can remember talking with some of my friends, a couple of white guys from New Jersey, talking about what I like to eat. And they looked at me and they said, "You like black people food." What are you talking about? I said, soup, beans, and cornbread and green.
You're talking my language. That's what I want to hear.
They said, well, where we come from, those are the soul food restaurants and black people like that. I said, well, that's hillbilly food where I come from, and poor white people eat that too. And through that education process, and I know y'all down around Mississippi, and this is really, I think, relevant. I learned quick that as a, hillbilly Southerner who come up in them coal fields, that I had fundamentally more in common with the overwhelming majority of African American students who were on that campus than I did with people who look like me. And that was probably one of the best lessons I got at George Mason. In any event, I decided to go to law school because I thought that was where I was going to learn everything I needed to know to defend truth, justice, and the American way. You come out of a blue collar family and kind of your metrics for success or be a doctor or a lawyer. And I couldn't do math and wasn't that good at science, but I could talk and write a little bit. And I had these ambitions and visions as to what I could do. So I went to law school at the University of Kentucky. And it was probably within the first semester and $15,000 taken on in student loans when I had never had any debt, that just like the old Bugs Bunny cartoon, I was like, man, I think I took a wrong turn at Albuquerque. And now this scene and the substance of what I'm being taught doesn't have anything to do with what I thought it was going to be. And what I can tell y'all in your audience is, whether we're educated in school or whether we watch law shows on TV, we're taught that, the law is this instrument through which we achieve the discovery of truth and the achievement of justice. That's not true. The law in America is a farce, and it is a tool that the hand who has purchased the power to use it deploys as it wishes.
I feel that.
On whatever that outcome is and however they want to manipulate and ravage the language to come to the outcome that they desire. Law is not synonymous with truth or justice. And that was probably the hardest and most significant lesson I got from my legal education. And it was a lesson that was reinforced throughout the 16 years of what was an accidental legal career, doing workers' compensation law, defending primarily employers across the state of Kentucky in their litigation. And I represented Walmart, Tennessee Valley Authority, and Tyson Foods. And in Kentucky, workers' compensation law is not handled in the courtroom. It's handled by some administrative law judges. And the governor of Kentucky appoints those judges. And the people who recommend those judges to the governor of Kentucky are lawyers. And those lawyers are contributors to the governor who appoints those judges. So oftentimes I would go to what I thought was going to be a hearing, and I discovered that the lawyer sitting across from me held appointment power over the judge who was going to determine that case. So what we had was this political patronage system that masqueraded as a legal system. And really the only legitimacy that was there was the legitimacy of patronage that had bought the power to influence the judge to grant the award that the person sitting at that table expected to have, who had bought the authority to have that influence. And, people hear, well, you represented Walmart and it's this big corporate entity, and don't they have all these deep pockets, and why ain't they the ones with the influence? The way in which law is deployed depends upon the predilections and preferences of those who wield it. And just because you're a big company doesn't mean you're necessarily going to wield that weapon. It all comes down to the hand that holds it. And in this case, it was the personal injury trial lawyers who held that weapon. And between 2000 and 2016, I saw the opioid epidemic begin and explode through my caseload out across the state. I saw the emergence of what I called a doctor-lawyer disability complex, which is this symbiotic economic relationship between personal injury lawyers and doctors of dubious morality who traffic in the misery of human beings. If a person didn't come into the system crippled, they were going to be by the time they were through either the performance of an unnecessary and highly invasive surgery that would require them to be placed upon high-powered opioid pain medication for the rest of their lives, or if they couldn't justify the performance of surgery, they just put them on the pills and they would become pharmacologically disabled. I saw this again and again and again.
Wow.
I could go in and have the entire Harvard medical faculty validate the points that I was making in a case. I could look at the judge, look at the lawyer, and know exactly what was going to happen in that case, and know that every bit of my work and my client's resources were futile and pointless because it was already baked in terms of what was going to happen. This is just one little state and one little area of the law. And this reality operates at scale across the entirety of American society, wherever you have a courthouse. So I went through that legal career, hated most of it. For as bad as the practice was, the business is even worse. And I don't mean to be all negative, but you asked for how I got here.
Yeah.
You bare bones. I often tell folks everything I learned about how not to relate to other human beings or manage an organization, I learned in a law firm. And in December of 16, I got a call from a guy who had done some evaluations and said, "Hey, what do you know about Social Security disability?" I said, "Well, I know it and workers' compensation go hand in hand. Aside from that, not much." He said, "Well, the state of Kentucky's been second behind West Virginia for as long as anyone knows in terms of the percentage of our people who get Social Security disability. The governor of the state wants to know why, and he's asked if I know anyone who can come in and do an assessment of the system. And I've offered them your name, and they're going to be in touch." And I said, "Well, thank you, sir. Anytime you need your shoes shined, your yard mowed, you let me know, because if I get raptured out of this legal career, I'm going to owe you a lifetime of gratitude."
Yeah.
Long story short, I came to run Kentucky's Social Security disability system. Led a team of policy experts in what was the first of its kind 35-year study of the system's impact on the state. And I'll give you all a couple of key statistics. Between 1980 and 2015, Kentucky's population grew by 20%. Enrollment in Social Security disability grew by 249%. Childhood enrollment in the disability program grew 449%. We were able to go down and identify exactly how many pills every SSI Medicaid beneficiary was getting that caused any kind of habituation. And what we found was that between 2001 and 2015, there was a 210% increase in the number of opioid prescriptions issued to every SSI Medicaid adult in the state of Kentucky. There was a 168% increase in the issuance of habituating psychotropic medications to children within that same system. And what I mean by that is, for children in particular, and we're talking about anything that is a controlled substance, amphetamines, whether that is Adderall, antidepressants, Prozac, the whole thing. Every Kentucky SSI Medicaid child, and this, we just took the raw number of pills and divided by number of children. Every Kentucky SSI Medicaid child was getting over 250 psychotropic pills per year in 2001.
Yeah.
By the time we get to 2015, it is almost 500 pills per child.
Goodness.
It is appalling.
Yeah.
So this translates into a career running the child support enforcement system at the same time. The governor that I worked for didn't win his reelection. And then I went to work for the Attorney General's office, running the Office of Medicaid Fraud and Abuse Control, investigating and prosecuting doctors for fraud on that system. And I inherited a caseload that had a great number of doctors who were treating opioid addiction, but who, instead of treating addiction, were using their Suboxone and methadone clinics as glorified drug dealing operations, filling out pre-signed prescriptions, giving them to their nurse, going out of the country, and the nurse just having a cattle call every morning with as many people as would line up, handing them these prescriptions. No counseling, no services that were aimed at drawing them down to a life where they didn't have to have the opioid. Everything was about fomenting as much of that as possible. Then finally, Kentucky settled with a number of opioid manufacturers and distributors for their role in creating and exacerbating the opioid epidemic. Run that commission because I had kind of established this reputation as a no-nonsense, get-it-done public servant. When I was asked if I had interest in the job, I said, well, this is a very treacherous opportunity. Kentucky and Louisiana kind of jockey for the most corrupt states in the country, and this is a very treacherous opportunity for the state as a whole. If y'all will let me run it in a way that is accessible, transparent, and accountable, I'll do it. And they let me have the opportunity of the job. They asked what the priorities were, and I said, look, the very best thing that we can do, aside from funding everything that we already have, is take a small percentage of our money to try to create a therapeutic breakthrough for opioid dependence. The very best of what we have has about a 25% success rate. We're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on it as a state. We're spending billions of dollars on it as a country, and we've got to do better. The scale of this problem is outpacing our ability to effectively treat it. I didn't know what that potential opportunity to foster would be, but I started looking. In 2018, I had read that psilocybin mushrooms, or what people might know as the magic mushroom, had been discovered to have a significant impact on alcoholism, helping people who had drank for years come off of it. I come from a family with a generationally wicked relationship with alcohol, and this caught my attention. And I just continued to follow these scientific discoveries that what had been the party drugs of left-wing counterculture actually had some significant medical application to problems that we ain't been able to get our hands around.
Mm-hmm.
So I reached out to an author who had written about her own experiences with psilocybin. She wrote about them beautifully. And I said, hey, this is a job I've been given. What can you tell me about the world of psychedelics and whether there's anything that can effectively treat opioid dependence? She asked me if I had ever heard of Ibogaine. And this was on July 29th of 2022, and I had not. So when she told me about this, I basically worked a second full-time job off the books to learn everything I could about it. And whether it was through academic research literature, speaking to the foremost international scientific and medical experts on it, and more importantly, talking to the people who had literally been at the edge of the grave, who as a last-ditch effort to save their lives, went out on a limb to figure out if this weird-sounding substance called Ibogaine could perhaps save their lives. And to the last person that I spoke with, and I spoke with dozens, it had not only saved their lives, it had restored their lives in ways which were profound and had fundamentally changed them. And after hearing about this, I came to the conclusion that the opportunity Kentucky had to take a small percentage of its money to make this medically available in the United States was worth risking.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I had built by way of reputation and result with my life, and I bet myself on it. That's the background.
Yeah, man, I'm having my Reagan moment, man. Like I got chills. Like how the story you're telling, and I mean, if you don't think this is a spiritual story from sitting on Grandpappy's knee, telling you keep believing, keep working, all the stuff you've done from your college days, you know, knowing, kind of feeling out of place, but really plugging into real humanity, to working for the government. I mean, golly, and now here thinking we got to do something, and seeing the resources, but it didn't go through from what I've heard. I mean, Kentucky, they bailed on you, and you've now partnered. I guess are you in Texas now, carrying on? And tell me a little bit about this Ibogaine. Like, what, when you first heard the stories, what are some of the stories that you heard that really just gripped you, that made you really want to go all in on this? Because there's some powerful narratives.
I'll start with the last part of your question first, and then as we kind of get to the end, I appreciate you giving that independent affirmation of this being a spiritual journey, because between the end of what happened in Kentucky and what has now happened in Texas, there can be no other explanation for how these events have unfolded other than for reasons that I give thanks hourly. The divine hand has decided to allow me to serve this cause. And every minute I get to do it is just an indescribably rapturous honor. There was a lady by the name of Juliana Mulligan, and she was the first person I spoke with who had had an Ibogaine treatment to resolve her opioid addiction. I reached out to Juliana and I said, hey, I've been directed to you to have you tell me your story. And she started telling it. And Juliana said that she had been an opioid addict for about 10 years. She had done it all. Heroin, fentanyl, everything that you can think of. And she said that she had been in and out of different recovery centers. She said she tried every potential treatment that there was. She had tried abstinence. She had tried Suboxone and methadone. And she said, you know, I felt that I had been deceived when I got Suboxone treatment, because when I tried to come off of it to get completely abstinent, my Suboxone withdrawal made my heroin withdrawal seem like a cakewalk. And it was the most agonizing experience that I had ever had. And she said, I just got so tired of being in and out of rehabs, in and out of jail. She said, at one point I was homeless. I just decided that I wanted to go and do what I wanted without having to experience all of the bumps and scrapes and wounds that were caused by my lifestyle here in America. So she got a job teaching English as a second language in Columbia. And so that your audience knows, Columbia has what are essentially open pharmacies. And a person can just go in and get as much as they want of whatever they want.
Mhm.
And for Juliana, that meant free, unfettered access to as much opioid medication as she wanted to consume. She said she went down there and taught for a year and a half and had as much of whatever she wanted as she could get.
See, I'm glad I didn't know this existed when
That's
I was
right.
in addiction, because I'd be in Colombia right now.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Mm.
She said, one morning I looked in the mirror and she said, I realized that I was going to die. Unless I did something to give myself one last chance, I was going to die. And she said, I got online and just started looking for, opioid addiction cures. And this word Ibogaine came up. She said, I hadn't ever heard of it. It sounded weird and crazy and too good to be true, but I was desperate. And she said she scheduled herself with a clinic or with a provider. I don't know that it was a clinic. She scheduled herself for an Ibogaine treatment with somebody who had it in Guatemala. And at this time, she didn't know what the risks were. And it's important to note that Ibogaine comes with a very serious potential complication, and that is it can, if a person receives too much, slow down the time in between your heartbeats and send a person into something that's called torsades, a cardiac arrhythmia that essentially is a cardiac spiral that can result in cardiac arrest and death. At all times, Ibogaine must be administered by a clinical professional who knows what they're doing. Juliana didn't make her way to a person like this. It was an underground provider who didn't know how to handle it. She said, they gave it to me. And she said, I went into cardiac arrest 6 times and almost died. She said, I remember the Ibogaine experience itself. I remember the resuscitation efforts that were made. And she said, I remember the next thing was I opened my eyes and I was in the intensive care unit of a Guatemalan hospital.
Wow.
And the first thing that sat in on me was I felt the best that I could ever remember feeling in my whole life. She said I had absolutely no withdrawal whatsoever, no desire for it, and a feeling as though I had never taken the first pill. She explained that for years she had been told that she had a disease, that disease was forever going to determine how her life would be led. She'd have to have medication, or she'd have to in some way be managed as a chronic case of a diseased person who couldn't overcome this problem. And she said, as I laid there, I realized for the very first time that I had absolute, total, and complete control of myself and my choices. And that I would, from there on, be able to define the life that I would lead because I owned it and was in control of it. And I would have a future that was defined by choice rather than compulsion. And she said, for me, perhaps the most important attribute was the fact that I came away with an absolute concrete affirmation that I am a spiritual being and that my creator has full, complete, perfect, and unconditional love for me. And she said, Bryan, even though I almost died and would never want for anyone to have my experience, if I had to go back and do it all again, I wouldn't hesitate.
Mm-hmm.
And she is bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and has been clean ever since. Now, if I had to distill the attributes down and be a little bit more granular about it, what I've come to learn is that the reason why opioid and other substance dependencies are so hard to kick is because what they actually create is a neurochemical brain injury.
Mm-hmm.
It affects the brain's ability to produce those things that drive all of our most baseline human instincts. We have dopamine and serotonin, and those are the things that cause us to eat, drink, procreate, fight, flight. They are the most primitive drivers of our behavior and the most powerful. So when someone stops taking opioids, or they stop taking meth, or they stop drinking out alcohol, the serotonin and dopamine production systems are completely and totally impaired. So when we see somebody engage in what appears to be just criminally depraved behavior,
Mhm.
what we're actually seeing are the symptoms of a neurochemical brain injury. And what Ibogaine does, by a way that folks don't understand and that candidly is a mystery, is it essentially resets the brain's neurochemistry to that which existed before a person ever used the first substance.
Man. Yeah.
And it does so in 36 to 48 hours. If a person tries to do it on their own, it takes at least 18 months for the brain to begin the process of producing normal neurochemical production of dopamine and serotonin. Ibogaine does it within 2 days. For 80% of people who are opioid dependent, who get a single treatment, they never experience the first withdrawal syndrome and they don't want to use again. So it is physiologically restorative. It is psychologically affirming in terms of the person coming away knowing that they are an individual who has ownership of themselves and their future. And then I think thirdly and most powerfully, it gives an individual concrete affirmation of their human divinity.
Mhm.
And that is the foundation upon which every life must be built if it's not going to be lived in despair.
I can I be honest?
Sure.
I have like a hard time with this whole thing because I went to treatment and I'm a firm believer in like the 12 steps and that community and that recovery. And so how does like Ibogaine fit in there? Like cuz what we learned is like science hasn't accomplished being able to just get rid of addiction. And you're telling me that like it has, and it's just difficult for me to I'm trying to figure out what I think.
Mhm.
You know?
Well, science has not figured out
Mhm.
how to get rid of addiction. That's why we have the problems we've got. We spend billions of dollars on science, and that science is called opioid maintenance medication,
Right.
in the form of Suboxone and methadone, where we use opioids with which to treat opioid dependency. It's better than nothing. It has saved thousands of lives and continues to do so, and should be always an available option. But it fails more than it succeeds. What we know is that nature, God's nature, has certain remedies within it that produce results that confound modern science and exceed the capacity of any man made molecule.
Mm.
So when we talk about Ibogaine, we're talking about something which, by virtue of its operation, is not just anti addictive, it is fully restorative of all dimensions of the impaired human being. And we're talking about the mind, body, and soul. This is something that grows straight from the ground. It's been used in the cultural and spiritual traditions of a West African culture called the Bwidis for centuries now. And they have known about its significant power for longer than the United States has been in existence. Um, I have heard genius level. There's a gentleman by the name of Dalibor Samish who is at Columbia University. He is a true genius biochemist, renowned. There's another neuropsychiatrist by the name of Dr. Nolan Williams out of Stanford University. He has done some just remarkable research on the effects of Ibogaine treatment on the brains of Special Forces veterans. I have heard each of these gentlemen express, though in different ways, what I would call is the reality that Ibogaine is the most sophisticated molecule on the planet. It's engineered from on high, and there's not a human hand or mind that can explain why it does what it does, but they know what it does. And not only does it have a significant interruption effect on physiological addiction, but recent science has shown that it has significant regenerative impact on the brain itself.
Mhm.
Nothing known to modern science. There's not a pill, there's not a procedure, there's not any Western medical intervention that is of the utmost nature that restores the brain. 30 U.S. Special Forces veterans had their brains scanned before and after an Ibogaine treatment. These gentlemen went for traumatic brain injury and all the symptoms that come with that. Many of them had been pharmacologically addicted by the VA to psychotropic medications as well as to legally prescribed by the white collar and prescription pad opioids. When these veterans came back, their symptoms of post traumatic stress and TBI had, if not been outright eliminated, almost fully in remission. They had seen dramatic restorations of their individual ability to function in just regular daily life. MRIs were taken before and after that treatment for each of them. And what the MRI showed was that with a single treatment, the white matter on the surface of their brains, and for your audience, the white matter is the electrical highway across which all of our thoughts and impulses travel. It's the structure of the brain that is impaired by multiple sclerosis when those lesions grow and eventually produce profound paralysis over the long term. The white matter grew and thickened in size across the surface of all of these veterans' brains. All of the dark spots that had been apparent on MRI imaging indicative of dead brain tissue from TBI had vanished. The centers of the brain responsible for emotional regulation and executive functioning grew in size, and the average reversal of brain age was 1.5 years for the cohort of 30, with the top 5 seeing their brains reverse in age almost 5 years. What we're talking about is a natural molecule which seems to have profound and singular neuroregenerative capacities that are just now being understood. If we develop Ibogaine as a beachhead for a breakthrough therapeutic treatment of opioid and polysubstance dependency, I am convinced that we will find that it has broader applications to a number of neurological diseases that impact and degenerate the brain, for which we don't have good answers at present.
Yeah.
When these people, these just like incredible stories that are going on and they come out of this treatment and they're feeling just like they've never felt before, how are they like maintaining that feeling? Like are they in any like mutual support groups? Are they going to counseling or therapy, or are they just better forever? Like how does that work?
It is not a better forever. It is not a now and forevermore.
Mhm.
It is a window of restoration that gives an individual a clear and coherent pathway to rebuild a shattered life in ways that will prevent the sorts of pathologies that they previously had to deal with. The reality is, because a person has to go outside the United States to get this, there is no recovery support structure. You have some clinics offshore that try to maintain peer support groups after a person has gone through treatment delivered remotely, in which they do their best in a remote setting to keep their hands on the individuals who have gone through the treatment. If you take any person, whether it's with the existing modalities that we have, or whether it's with an Ibogaine treatment, and you drop them into a toxic environment and they are isolated unto themselves, having to deal with all the same people, places, and things that shattered their life to begin with, the prospects for long-term success are diminished.
Mhm.
This is what reinforces the necessity of making this a medical reality in the United States. We are spending in Medicaid dollars $540,000 per opioid dependent individual now on a 25% success rate.
Mhm.
If you do a 10-day Ibogaine treatment in the United States and it costs, let's say it's $60,000, let's say it's $70,000. Even if you cut the total cost exposure in half, and let's say instead of spending $540,000 per case, let's say we're going to spend $200,000. What can we do with that additional $140,000 to provide that individual with the sort of care
Mhm.
and restorative support services that they need to rebuild their lives? And when we get right down to the pure mechanics of it, what we're talking about is an opportunity to dramatically improve acute treatment outcomes that would reduce costs in such a way as, if it's done correctly, you really allocate your savings to create the sorts of recovery supports that are necessary to maintain long-term durable recovery. Ibogaine is a beginning. It is not an end. And if we're going to maximize the benefits of that beginning, which exceed anything that we can currently offer, there has to be a support structure around it that is anchored to its unique properties.
Mhm.
Then how would these pharmacy companies feed their families?
That's right.
Well, this gets into the necessity of the public dollar, and you're correct. As long as you have the models that we have, where companies are making a killing on a person taking a pill every day, um, they don't have the incentive to create something that a person may take 2 to 3 times in their entire lives.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They want that pill taken every day, every month, every year until the person exits this life. Ibogaine is totally contrary to that entire model, and it's going to take some special philosophy and special work among aligned minds and hearts to make this a reality.
Do you see a future where, I mean, obviously you see a future where America has access to Ibogaine. Do you see a future where it would be covered under insurance?
100%. To kind of come full circle, the project was ended in Kentucky. The commission that I ran held 3 high-profile public hearings on it because we wanted to be transparent, the people of Kentucky to have a full record to review as what this opportunity represented. And what I found through the 6-month exploration process was that it is in this state, the support was bipartisan and the opposition was bipartisan. And the key opposition which led to the project's termination was the shared community of financial interest held by the University of Kentucky,
Mm.
the current Kentucky Governor, Andy Beshear, and the current Kentucky Attorney General, all of whom have substantial direct or indirect financial, business, and professional ties to the opioid maintenance industry.
Mm.
That is the industry that is most threatened with disruption if Ibogaine ever becomes a reality in the United States. The 3 of them, the University of Kentucky, the governor, and the attorney general. Governor's a Democrat, attorney general's a Republican, all ganged up on this and they killed it. And I knew I was going to find another job, but that really wasn't where my mind was. My mind was on all the people here in Kentucky that I had seen and heard by the thousands.
That's right.
And we are desperate.
Mhm.
Nothing that you're doing is making the difference that we need to make. And while we appreciate this effort to give us medication for this, it's flooding our communities and causing as much addiction as it's treating. Please stop. Please adjust your approach. We've got to have something different and new than what we've had before. So this touched off an 8-month odyssey where I went to work for a guy by the name of Rex Elsass. He had lost a son to addiction. His son's name REID, and REID passed away at the age of 26 from a fentanyl overdose after struggling for a decade. Rex created a foundation in his son's name, which means the REID Foundation, reaching everyone in distress. And he said, "Hey, I've been supporting and following everything you're doing in Kentucky. Would you come work with me and my foundation? And I'll do everything I can to find a way for you to transplant your work somewhere else where it could flourish." So I traveled for 8 months to Ohio and South Dakota and New Mexico and fielded calls from state leaders in about 3 or 4 other states and just worked desperately for months through all kinds of meetings and discussions and advocating to try to get this to take root. And then finally, in August of 24, I got a call from some folks in Texas. And I'd had the opportunity to meet Governor Perry in June of 23, shortly after the Kentucky announcement. He had been supportive of the campaign there. And in August, when I got a call from some folks who said, "Hey, we know some legislators in Texas who want to take on a psychedelic project." The state had set aside $2 million to fund psilocybin research in 2021. And they thought they were ready for their next big thing. And they said, "What do you think Texas ought to do? We've got a $16 billion budget surplus we're going to allocate in 2025. And I said, "Well, I think Texas needs to finish the job that was begun in Kentucky."
Yeah.
I reached out to Governor Perry, told him what the opportunity was. He said, "Well, I don't want to put anything on you ain't willing to do, but if you're willing to get involved with this, I'll coach the team if you'll be the quarterback and get the ball down the field." I said, "You got it." So we went to Texas and we put on a 6-month, it's longer than that. Oh, it was an 8-month intensive barnstorming campaign through the state legislature and all through state leadership to try to get the job done that was started in Kentucky. And On June the 9th of this year, Governor Greg Abbott, with his own hand, with me behind him, signed Senate Bill 2308, authored by State Representative Cody Harris and State Senator Tan Parker, which allocated $50 million of Texas's general fund to create a public-private partnership matched by a co-equal $50 million by a consortium of universities, private hospital systems, and drug developers to get Ibogaine all the way through the FDA. This is the first time that an individual state has ever made a direct investment in drug development to address multiple concurrent public health crises within its borders that are representative of the national reality.
Wow.
And it is also the single largest public investment in psychedelic research and medical development in all of history.
Wow.
And I am proud to say that the momentum generated out of Texas has found its way into places like Kentucky again, Tennessee, and of all places, Mississippi. Governor Perry and I, over the next 2 years, aim to bring 6 to 12 additional states in direct partnership with Texas, since this is the moonshot of our time, and we're going to give it all we got.
You are. Y'all sure are. Yeah, so at Recovery Lab, we are hardcore psychic change recovery. We believe in the 12 steps. We believe in, really behavior modification, doing everything it takes to change our minds, change our attitude, change our lives. And so that's why sometimes we have reticence to some of this stuff. And I'll be honest with you, a friend turned me on to your Joe Rogan podcast. And I said, man, I'm not listening to that, man. I do not trust a drug dealer. I don't care. I'm not going to listen. He said, just check it out. I think you'll find something meaningful. I did listen to it, and it sent me down this wormhole. I was just like, cause I've abused. I mean, I spent my whole 8th and 9th grade in the cow pasture picking mushrooms. You know what I'm saying? Like, there wasn't a whole lot of times I ever thought it was anything more than just a fun thing to do. But I said, let me take a look at some of this stuff. And I did. And the first thing I found was a Stanford study online. And I'm looking at some of their actual MRI that they're describing their real, pre and post MRIs where they can see brain function changing. And then I'm looking into, like, I'm super big into a 12-step program. I love Bill Wilson's work. I start finding out that Bill Wilson way back in the day is dropping acid, dropping LSD, and AA really suppressed that because it kind of didn't go so well with the whole group. But Bill was into that thing for about 10 or 15 years and wrote about it and different stuff. And there's a lot of research on what he was into. I started to find out that a lot of this stuff has been around for a long time and it has been used. So it kind of slowly opened my eyes to at least be like, let me check some of this stuff out. But all the research that I've done and all the stuff that I found out, whether it's been my AA research or just looking at Stanford stuff or listening to your podcast, all really pale in comparison to when I heard your story about you putting your money where your mouth is. So really say, like, what is this all about? Because from what I understand is it's not just, you're not just on the outside. You've done some stuff. Would you share what that's been like for you and your family?
Well, I'm happy to address on the personal side, but I want to make one important point that dovetails with what you said. There is nothing fun about an Ibogaine experience. The one reason that most people ain't never heard of it is because there's no recreational or party use for it.
That's right.
We all know what cocaine is. We all know what heroin is. We all know what meth is. For anything that has a recreational application, there is a healthy and thriving street economy somewhere where you can get it. Nobody's ever heard of an Ibogaine rave because they don't exist. Because it is a very difficult experience physically, oftentimes psychologically and spiritually. If you take Ibogaine, the very first thing you're going to have to do is lay down because you're going to be in a state of semi-paralysis for 10 to 12 hours. And for about 85% of folks, you're going to throw up repeatedly over the course of those 10 to 12 hours. And if you have to go to the restroom, you're going to have assistance because you can't walk. And you're going to be aware the entire time. This is not dissociative. You are at all times oriented to person, place, and time. You know everything that is going on. If I had received Ibogaine, I could talk to y'all just as plain and clear and coherently as I am now. But if you close your eyes, you are going to perhaps see images and themes from your life that its effect will produce for you to essentially do a biopsy on yourself. So I always say, folks, if your idea of a party is being semi-paralyzed and throwing up for 12 hours, you're going to love Ibogaine. If that ain't your idea of a good time, then you're not going to want to go back. Because I do believe in practicing what I preach, and I ain't never going to suggest somebody do something that I ain't willing to do. I thought it was very important, especially in light of the scaremongering and the stigmatizing of it that was being done by people who said, oh, we can't stigmatize Suboxone. Ironically enough. I went in November of 23 and I took the medicine that I was out there advocating for, as did my wife. She decided to go and take it with me because she had heard the testimonials of people who came to Kentucky and described their own experiences. She had had a significant postpartum depression back in 2001 with the birth of her son. And it resulted in her having to be placed on Celexa, which is a SSRI antidepressant, because she had developed a psychotic mood disorder that was in the family of bipolarism. And she said, I want to see if I can come off Celexa if I receive Ibogaine treatment. My wife's last Celexa was November 23rd of 2023. She's been Celexa free ever since. And if somebody had told me that, I would never have believed it, because
Wouldn't wanted it. Yeah. Stay on it, honey.
If she missed it for one day, I could look in her eyes and tell that she had missed it. And I couldn't be in the house with her. For me, it was a very difficult experience. And I did it a second time simply because there are two clinics that operate in Mexico that kind of have best practices as such things exist. And I didn't want to talk about it publicly about one unless I did it at both. I wanted them to not be offended and think I was playing favorites. So the first time was November of 23. The second time, through gritted teeth, was December of 24. And I did not look forward to it. I was not excited about it, but felt that it needed to be done to maintain the legitimacy of my advocacy. I will say that from a spiritual perspective, the two together were without question the most profound spiritual experiences I have ever had in my life.
Amen.
And it is my personal opinion that Ibogaine is absolutely engineered by the divine hand. And it is engineered for the exact purpose to bring restoration of mind, body, and soul, whether that person is impaired or not. It has the capacity to connect you to your divinity in a way that is truly unique. And, I sense that we all kind of come from the South, and we know what it's all about to go to Sunday school and church and to hear the preacher preach and talk and prayer said. You can hear something, you can learn, you can agree, and you can believe. It's a whole order of magnitude different when you know. And in my opinion, anyone who would wish to exercise the choice to receive an Ibogaine treatment in the United States should have that right of self-determination, if for no other reason than to understand the reality of how truly special they are as an individual who is the image of their eternal creator.
I have sort of like a question about, because I know that you speak about God and you seem like a strong Christian man. Do you ever struggle or feel conflicted about using a mind altering substance to have that spiritual experience?
If the experience was one that created habituation, if it was one that produced a reality that was contrary to those things that I was taught, and primarily those things were God is real, God is eternal, and God is love, then I think that I would have to ask some serious questions as to whether what I was doing was in any way appropriate. But based on my experience, everything that I have received from God's medicine is consistent with what God has revealed about God's nature throughout human time. The benevolence, the fundamental essence of love. And I would add for the Ibogaine experience that, we hear about the judgment throne and being held accountable and facing up to who you are and your failures and what it is that you've got to do to become who you are intended to be. One of the most powerful testimonials I heard about an Ibogaine experience was from a young woman who had been an opioid addict starting in high school. And she said, I put my parents through hell for a decade. And her father gave her $5,000 and said, I've read about this. I think it can help you. Please take it and go. And she said, I was in full-blown addiction. He didn't know if I was going to go to Mexico with his $5,000, but because of how much damage I had done, I went. And in her testimony, she described essentially having an experience whereby she was looking at herself through her mother's eyes throughout her entire addiction journey. And she felt to her core all of the pain that she had caused her mother. And she said she was just devastated to experience what her mother did, watching her own self through her destruction. Now, when I hear that, I hear about someone who has been brought to the Lord's judgment throne side of life in a way that no lecture, in a way that no discussion, in a way that no family member could ever bring home to the reality of the addicted mind. You know, we read that Bible and we're told to take it literally. And I'm always mindful of the fact that God spoke to Moses through the burning bush. He used a plant to communicate divine truth. Now, if God could speak to Moses through that burning bush, he can speak to each of us through Ibogaine. And it's up to us to have the discernment to recognize the light of truth as reflected in love and the reality of who we are and who we need to be to reflect that love.
Yeah. I think C.S. Lewis, I can't quote it, but I think he in his conversion, he spoke about the story of Jesus and being the Messiah was just almost too crazy to not be true. You know, born and wrapped in a hay bale of a disreputable, who knows, a virgin birth, and just coming out of nothing and performing miracles and coming back. It was just too crazy not to be true. And as I hear your story and I hear the story of some of the stuff, it's like Ibogaine's almost just too crazy not to be true. I mean, because who wants to do it? Even the people who are doing it, it ain't fun. We don't want to go drop a bunch of Ibogaine and go for a walk. I mean, it's a lot of seeing the darker side and getting introduced to the things that we wish we hadn't have done, but also just your journey of, your whole story. It seemed like you were the perfect candidate to be doing this stuff. I'm so glad to be able to get found out what you're doing, the work you're doing, and how you're doing it. But I'm most curious is like, how can people who want to support you, want to support this movement that really don't have any kind of, don't have a lever to pull? We've proved that democracy doesn't really work. I mean, my votes don't really count because they'll do whatever they want to do in the end anyways. So what can we really do to support this kind of movement?
Well, what we're trying to do is multidimensional chess. This is a scientific, medical, political, but most significantly, cultural opportunity for us to help reestablish America on a foundation that recognizes our common human divinity. And to that end, for any of your audience members who wish to be connected to and to become involved, I think the very best thing that they can do is go to americansforibogaine.org, check out the organization. It has its Instagram account as well as an X account, as do I and Governor Perry. And all fundamental change in the United States begins at the kitchen table among family and friends who share perspectives and information and ideas that they may not be exposed to. Take what you've heard, share it, discuss it, illuminate with it. And by doing so, you will create organic motivation throughout the society to make this an operationalized reality. I think about this like a beehive. By virtue of establishing Ibogaine not as the end-all be-all for everyone exclusive therapeutic pathway, but as an additional therapeutic option to improve outcomes. As we have folks who have the sort of transformative experiences that most folks who receive an Ibogaine treatment do, and establishing it as a beachhead for the treatment of trauma and addiction in American society, which are the most profound symptoms of spiritual affliction that pervade who we are right now. Person by person, family by family, community by community, you restore a state and you restore a nation. This is a generational reconstruction project. And we are just now starting to lay the foundation for what that's going to look like, hopefully before my time on this earth is over. Get involved, be a messenger, and be somebody who looks to reflect the light and love of our Creator on our neighbor who has never seen or experienced either.
Amen.
Bryan, first of all, thank you again for so much for joining us. When we met at the Capitol a couple weeks ago, it was just, there was some sort of, I don't know, I just felt this spiritual thing. And one thing that I want to say is the word psychedelic. Immediately my mind goes to drugs. This is a drug. This is something that's abused. This is something that I used to use to party. It's bad, 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 bad. And I feel like God is using you to completely change the way that we see the word psychedelic. For me, and I knew nothing about Ibogaine. I knew nothing about anything like that until I heard your episode on Rogan. And seeing and listening to how engaged Rogan was to what you and Rick Perry were saying, there's something clicked inside of me, and there was a voice that I can only think of and see as God said, okay, look into this. This is something that could profoundly change the way that this world operates. And I am unbelievably grateful that you are listening to God and allowing yourself to be used in this way. Many, many people in the recovery world, they're going to hear the word psychedelic and they're going to immediately be turned off. And I want to encourage those people, maybe you're wrong. Maybe this is something that can help first responders, veterans, people who struggle with PTSD, addiction. Maybe this is a solution. Maybe it's worth taking a look at. And here you are at the forefront of this research and pushing this forward. And I'm personally grateful for what you have done and what you are doing to get this into the public. And I know that we don't have you for all day, and you know, we've got to let you go. You're a very busy person, and we're super grateful, but thank you for listening to your heart. Thank you. Thank you.
Those are words to live up to. And you've honored me greatly with the perspective you share. I'm always acutely aware of what a tremendously fragile and feeble vessel I am. And if those are the things that you perceive, I thank you with all my might for affirming me in that way. And I hope to live up to what you've described. And Brynn, I thank you for those challenging questions. They're questions that need to be asked. And if we ever visit again, I hope to keep this sort of dialogue going, because you can only get to the core of truth by challenging those things that are asserted wherever they come from. And I loved your questions and the dialogue it precipitated. And I know we are up on time, but is it all right if I read what I have to say is probably my favorite message that I've received from somebody who had an experience?
Yes, please.
Okay. And this is real. I don't want anybody to think I'm making this up. I got this on the 4th of July. And this came from a couple that lives in Hutto, Texas, by the name of Christy and Jeremy Saucier. I think I'm saying their name correctly. This was sent to me on Instagram. I don't know how to log into my own social media. I've got a good team of volunteers who helps me do it. But sometimes I'll get a direct message and they send it to me. And I got this one on July the 4th. And the person apparently had messaged me a couple of times before, and it's the wife, Christy. And I'm just going to read what this person said. And let me disavow my own individual significance at any and all times to this. I'm simply a servant that's given the opportunity, and I never take on any sense of self-importance. So I always want to disclaim that when I read these messages. It says, I wanted to follow up on our last message and give Bryan our deepest thanks for introducing us to Ibogaine. My husband and I completed our treatment of Ibogaine, followed by 5-MeO DMT, and it was nothing short of a miracle. As I mentioned before, my husband lost 12 fellow Marines at once due to an IED in Iraq at the height of the war from 9/11. This man has been plagued, in all caps, for 21 years with post-traumatic stress, survivor's guilt, and alcohol abuse due to this tragic event. This medicine met him with a vision of all of the fallen men he knew looking down from heaven and telling him that it's okay to grow old. He then saw himself as an old man standing by his buddies' grave sites, honoring them. It was an experience that instantly released him from the horrible chains of post-traumatic stress and survivor's guilt. It was an experience that gave him permission to live the life God intended as a father and husband, and diminished his appetite for alcohol. One treatment gave us our life back. Please give our heartfelt thanks to Bryan. I reached out to her to ask if I could read this and put it on Instagram and X as a message. She responded and she said, "We're honored, and you're free to tag us and know that we are devout Christians, and our whole community was behind us going on this journey, so we're totally fine with it. And I'd like to add that I was inspired by Bryan's story of his wife, which is what prompted me to try it alongside my husband, and have been prescribed heavy-duty antidepressants since I was 19. I felt immediate healing, and at age 43, I'm no longer taking any medicine and feel purged from what conventional therapy couldn't do. Ibogaine acted like the windshield wipers, clearing the debris that was blocking our view so we could finally see where we're going. Praise God for you and all for what you do on this mission, and will hopefully change the lives of millions."
Man,
That's what gets me up every day, and thanks my maker for letting me do this.
powerful. I love you, man. That's amazing. You're my champ. I mean, just seeing the heart. I mean, you're there. You were there. Thank you so much for coming in. We'll be praying for you, rooting for you, supporting. If we can figure out a way to mail you some shrimp and grits or something, man, I would do anything. It's amazing. Thank you so much, Bryan Hubbard. It's been an amazing episode, brother. I'm gonna see you on the trail. I'm gonna see you out there, man. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, sir, for coming down Mississippi. Just give me some good greens.
Yes, sir. All right. Thank you so much, guys. We will see you next time on the Recovery Lab.
Thank you.
Thank you.